So I kept going back to the science and going back to the science. And that's where I figured out that there are 6 different length fasts. And that when I put people into these different length fasts, their body healed in extraordinary ways. And in Fast Like a Girl, I map out those 6 different length fasts. I say this with full transparency. My in-house supplement business went way down. My profits in supplements went way down because I no longer needed the supplements to repair your gut. I no longer needed the supplements to improve your brain power. I no longer needed supplements to help your adrenals. I just needed to teach you how to go in and out of these different fasting lengths. So that blew me away.
At the beginning, we're going to kind of chat about fasting for anyone who's new to it. I think a lot of people that are on here have been following Mindy for a while, but I do know there's some people in my community that are new to it. So we'll talk about fasting, why we love it as a tool, why you felt called to write this book. Then we've got some questions that came in through the community ahead of time. Some people in Europe that can't get on the call. Everyone will get the recording, by the way, in their inbox by about noon Eastern tomorrow. And then we'll open it up for questions. Most likely questions are just going to go in the chat group and I'll read them out to Mindy. Mindy, thank you so much. I know you've got so much going on. You are all over the place. And I'm so excited to dive in this conversation.
Thank you. And thank you for those of you that put your camera on. I'm a visual person, so I really like seeing people's faces. So thank you. And yeah, thank you. Like there's no judgment here. Like I literally woke up this morning and had to pop on a call. And so I looked at my hair and I'm like, whoop, headband going on, solid color shirt, off I go. And that was like, I don't know, that was at 8:00 this morning. So I love that I show up and Melissa's got her hat on. So literally no judgment. Nobody's judging how you look. We're all in the same boat here.
Yeah. Well, that was honestly a huge intention around this community. It's like a place for us to come as women and not feel like we need to perform. I mean, once it gets dark here, it's going to be red light only in here. Like we all come as we are and we all do this in the way that works for us, like bras off, makeup off, like we're here to connect.
Yeah, love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Bras off.
I didn't get
the memo about the bra off. Shoot. Okay.
Yeah. When you join a Nook, that's the whole thing. You make it nookie. So whatever makes it nookie, I got my hoodie, I got my tea.
Shoot. I didn't know about the bra. Can I go take it off? No.
Yes. Swing it. All right. Well, good. Let's start. Let's dive in. I think we just start with like, why is fasting such kind of from the beginning, like what first piqued your interest and then why did you dive head in with so much curiosity?
Yeah. It's a really good question. It's funny because I was just putting my speech together for Health Optimization Summit in London next week. And I always like to go through a set of linear thoughts of like, and my first thought is always like, how did we get here? And what's going on in the world? And what tools do we have for our health? So it lines up perfectly with that question. I think the biggest piece that if I could really emphasize to people, I was in practice for 25 years and I had a very, very busy practice, much like Melissa and her husband, like just tons of people coming in, biohacking, everything from chiropractic to detox to nutrition advice to hormone balance, like everything we could naturally do. We were doing it with a huge emphasis on lifestyle. And about 10 years into my practice, I started to notice some new trends. And a couple of the trends were people weren't coming in with one symptom anymore. Everybody was coming in with 5 to 10 symptoms, mostly women. Women were coming in with a lot more symptoms than men. But all of a sudden nobody had one symptom. It was like literally nobody. They all had a variety. Second thing is when I was first in practice, I had people that would say, well, quite sure what you're saying. I'm going to go check it with my medical doctor and see what he was usually he says. And 10 years in, what I heard from women specifically is whatever you do, I do not like, this is what they literally sounded like. I do not want to go back to my medical doctor. He doesn't understand me. He just gives me antidepressants. He doesn't get what I'm doing with my lifestyle. Like I am never going back there. Like really strong, vehement, like I'm here to keep myself out of that office. Mm-hmm. So I was doing a lot of detox. I was doing a lot of nutrition. And we were getting good results. We were getting great results. And somewhere along this journey, I discovered the research on fasting. And when I first discovered it, I discovered it through the lens of autophagy. So autophagy is this idea that in the absence of food, there are many things that stimulate autophagy, but in the absence of food, the cells heal themselves. Well, that was in my ethos of health, that the body heals itself. I never doubt that. I knew the body healed itself. So I was like, well, what if fasting could get people to start to heal in a quicker way? So I started teaching what I call metabolic. Well, it's not my term, but what is called metabolic switching, where I was giving food advice, teaching people how to eat good food. But I was having them compress that food into an eating window, leaving a longer period of time for fasting. And at the beginning, I only knew intermittent fasting. I only knew like 13 to 15 hours. That was what the original autophagy studies were done on. We didn't have all the studies we have now. So I just gave everybody a 15-hour window of fasting, leaving, 9 hours for eating. And just that one thing dramatically changed people's health, and quickly. Like in my clinic, I would see people every week or every couple of weeks because we were working so much on lifestyle. And so like a week would go by and somebody would walk in and it looked like they had taken like a fat coat off. Like in 1 week, all of a sudden the body looked so different. And I kept like trying to figure out like, what is the body doing just by tacking this 15 hours on? So I kept going back to the science and going back to the science. And that's where I figured out that there are 6 different length fasts. And that when I put people into these different length fasts, their body healed in extraordinary ways. And in Fast Like a Girl, I map out those 6 different length fasts. So the first thing I want to say is putting yourself in a fasting window. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. I love seeing my book up and everywhere. I have people that are like, I was in the airport and I saw a bunch of people reading your book. I've been on airplanes where I've seen people reading the book. So it's very sweet. But when you put yourself in this fasted state, what I really want you to know is it's a healing state. And so the longer you stay in there, more healing happens. So the most common question I get is, how long should I fast? And the response to that is, well, what kind of healing are you looking for? Are you trying to heal your gut? Well, then let's throw a 24-hour fast. Did you overdo it on vacation? And so you needed to detox? Okay, well, we just need to go 17 hours. Do you have really stuck weight? Okay, well, 36 hours, what the research shows is the thing that will get the body to unstick weight. And we've proven that in our community as well. So I started looking at these healing lengths as healing tools. Then when we went back to food, I just kept food really simple. It was like, just eat real food, like just eat nature's food, like just get off the chemicals. Mm-hmm. And so I had to teach, that's a little more complicated than you would think, but I had to teach people just some basic food philosophies. What happened was short of a miracle. We literally, I say this with full transparency, my in-house supplement business went way down. My profits in supplements went way down, because I no longer needed the supplements to repair your gut. I no longer needed the supplements to improve your brain power. I no longer needed supplements to help your adrenals. I just needed to teach you how to go in and out of these different fasting lengths. So that blew me away. The other thing that blew me away is that women got so excited about this fasting tool, they started doing it more and more and more. And a byproduct of that was, and I was one of those women, the byproduct of that is then I started getting people coming in and saying, my menstrual cycle is not really regular and my hair is falling out. And so I went back to the books and I looked at, what does estrogen need? What does progesterone need? What does testosterone need? And that's when I realized, oh, women have to do this metabolic switch according to their menstrual cycles. And so there are times when your body can handle a longer fast, and there's times when they can't. And if you have a menstrual cycle, I will tell you that the easiest way to understand this is when your hormones go high. This is during ovulation, day 11 to day 15. And right before you bleed, day 20 until the day you bleed. Those are not great times for longer fasts. But when your hormones go low, day 1 to day 10, they're in a lower state. Day 16 to day 19 in a lower state. This healing tool called fasting, if I throw a 3-day water fast at you, if I give you a dopamine reset 48-hour fast, it works in alliance with your hormones, and you can still use this healing tool. So that's really how Fast Like a Girl was developed. It was a clinical tool that I used. I saw it work on my women in my practice. I made modifications based off of what they told me. And then I went and taught the world on YouTube and on my socials. And I got more and more confirmation that this metabolic switch timed to a woman's hormones worked. To the point now, I just don't doubt it. You can go read my Amazon reviews. Sometimes I read them just to see the miracles that are happening. But one of the biggest things we're seeing is infertility. Women that are struggling to get pregnant all of a sudden now are able to get pregnant. They didn't have to spend $30,000, $40,000 on infertility medication. They just learned to metabolically switch according to their hormones, which is insane. So there's a lot of we can take this metabolic switch and we can really use it in a lot of different places. The last thing I want to say, and then we'll field the questions, is what about the menopausal woman? So if you're in perimenopause, and we can talk about, some questions around that. There's a lot more nuance there. Now, I will tell you, I discovered this in my 40s. So in my perimenopausal years, I'm 54 now. And I experimented on my perimenopausal body. For example, at 45, when I started spotting, and then a week later, I had a period. When I brought that up to doctors, they would say, oh, you're just going into perimenopause. When I brought that up to functional medicine doctors, they were like, yeah, you better go look at progesterone. Progesterone needs more glucose. So I learned to add carbs back in and carb load when I started spotting. And by the time I was 49, 50, I had the best periods of my life. I had figured it out. At 50 years old, I had figured it out. And then, 4 years later, it went away. So there's a lot there. And then the last thing I will say for the menopausal woman, and something new that I'm really, really thinking a lot about lately, is that we know 6 years after your last period, your brain is actually at its best. So even though perimenopause is bumpy, your brain reorganizes itself and actually is one of the best, most productive brains. Your amygdala, the part of the brain that is fight or flight, actually turns off the fight or flight reaction and becomes more empathetic. And so I've been thinking a lot about, well, what's the metabolic switch, the best switch for the menopausal brain? And this came from a discussion with Lisa Mosconi. She wrote a book called The Menopause Brain. I brought her onto my podcast, and she told me that the 6 years after your last cycle, that brain for a woman is the least sensitive to glucose. So if you go slamming into your postmenopausal years with a metabolic system that is completely mixed up and you are insulin sensitive, now you have all this glucose in your system. Your brain doesn't know what to do with it. And so it stores it as fat. It starts to kill neurons in the brain, and this leads to dementia and Alzheimer's. So my new feeling is this metabolic switch for the postmenopausal woman is stupid important, because your brain favors ketones. And Lisa and I talk about that on the podcast. Every postmenopausal woman I've spoken with tells me, yeah, when I go into ketosis, like the light bulbs go on, which I think a lot of us feel. So just something new that I'm working on that I think is important to say.
A whole other topic, but I just want to touch on that for a minute because a lot of the questions that came in from my community were from women in perimenopause and menopause, and
Yeah.
something that you're delving deep into right now. And I think there's just a lot more conversation around this. And that interview with Lisa is probably a great one for people to dive into.
Yeah.
Is like this beautiful part about menopause that we haven't been taught. And like how you just said, our brains are in the best state 6 years after our period stops. And I think there's just some, like I was reading the XX brain. I think you recommended that.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've been taught to like dread that time.
Yeah.
And I'm watching you embrace it fully because of the things
Yeah.
that you're learning, either from the research that you're doing or the book that you're writing next, or these women that you're interviewing. And I think we can start to approach that time with much more excitement and grace when we have this information. So I just think that's important for any of the women that do hear this either now or the recording. Mindy, maybe we'll link that interview to Lisa.
That would be great. Yeah.
Yeah.
People, it was a really good one because she did a good job of explaining her research, but I'll just want to extrapolate on that because I think it's really important if we have a lot of perimenopause and menopausal women in this group, is that each time there's a major shift in your hormones, what happens is your brain reorganizes itself and prepares itself for the next age appropriate task. And Lisa brought to my attention something called the grandmother effect, which is, it goes back to hunter-gatherer days. And the idea is that it sounds so sexist, but it was something like this. When the men, let's say the older kids, I'm sure some of them were women, went off to go hunt down food, left at the cave was a pregnant woman or a mom taking care of a baby and a bunch of little kids that weren't capable of hunting. So it was the grandmother that actually had to have a brain that oversaw that ecosystem, that cave system. And that grandmother had to be able to grab a couple toddlers, grab some kids and go and find food because the mom was so focused on taking care of her baby. So for the survival of our species, our postmenopausal brains had to become this incredible, what I call cultural leader. So the amygdala had to shut off because there was no room for fear, but there was room for empathy because she had to have enough care to take care of everybody else in the cave, around the fire. And and then she had to have a fitness level that allowed her to go and forage for food to bring it back. And so there's something really exciting about what happens to our brains, which is why if we have ketones, because we fasted and we learned how to get into this fasted state, you're just going to see a brain that is more beautiful than you've ever recognized based off of what your biology is set up for. And that's the discussion, to your point, Melissa, that's the discussion that's not being had around menopause.
Yeah. Well, I think it was also her book. Is her book The XX Brain?
Yeah, she did Menopause Brain and the XX Brain. Yeah.
Okay. So something she shared in there, which I think this is really interesting, and then we'll get to the questions, but because we're all either going through it now or we went through it or we're going to go through it. So part of the reason that we all have this view on menopause, Mindy, I know you know this, we talked about this, is, for so long, it was thought that it wasn't something that we were supposed to live to experience. And so it was thought that this menopausal process is like an accident.
Yeah.
Like how was that? So because now our lifespan is increasing, we're having this experience. So it's just been written off. Like it's been written off in research, ignored by doctors and practitioners. When in Lisa's book, she talks about how someone finally started to ask the question, like, what other mammals experience menopause? And I think the only other one is whales.
It's the closest
and
one.
Our common similarity is the closest one.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah, because it's fascinating.
No, there's like 4 species, but whales are one. So I'm curious what your feeling is on whales and us.
So that they're a matriarchal community, like the grandmothers raise the babies. So, the mothers are off doing the things and the grandmothers step into this wise, empathetic role and they take care of the babies. And I think in the human culture, that's where we get to step into like being an elder
Yes.
eventually and passing down the wisdom and having these
Yes.
beautiful connections and not being in our fight or flight rushing women brain. We get to sit
Yes.
down and share the stories with the next generation. So I think we're going to see, in the next 10 years, a total flip on the way that we look at menopause.
Yeah. Yeah. And, Melissa and I have been having a conversation, a lot of conversations about the matriarchal society versus the patriarchal society. And this is, I'll just say it really briefly so we can get to questions. But a patriarchal society, to me, the best definition I can find is its power over us.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it's not men, it's any structure that has power over us. And honestly, right now, our healthcare system is a patriarchal system. So
Yeah.
the minute a woman walks into that, she's dead in the water. It's like, unless she has a doctor that understands more of a matriarchal approach. And a matriarchal system honors the power within. So I think that's, when we look at the similarities between us and whales, it's like, that's a really important nuance, is that these cultures that have survived menopause tend to be more matriarchal. Now, there were 4 species. I may have to go back and look at the other 2 and see if they're matriarchal too. So
Yes.
I'll come back and let you know. But most species die when their reproductive system is over. The female version of that species dies because there's no need for her anymore. So really interesting. Super interesting.
I love that power within too. And, we will get to the questions. These are just really important things because these build the foundation, I think, of the understanding of this. And just touching on that, you think about back a while ago, when people went to someone to get health advice, that person, I think the practitioner honored their health within. And I think it's why, people that don't go to chiropractors or don't know or don't understand chiropractors get a bad rap. But once someone goes to a chiropractor, they love their chiropractor. And it's because we as chiropractors are taught to listen, and we're taught to not go in with an ego. And we're taught that our job is to find the power and the health within the patient and bring them out. That's why a lot of chiropractors won't even call them patients, because patient means to suffer. And our job is to help you see that you're healthy within. And this goes along with fasting, because fasting is such a powerful tool to do that. But, at the beginning, Mindy, you talked about how a lot of these patients, especially women, were saying, I don't want to go back to my doctor. Well, what we're seeing is a lot of these medical doctors that are starting to get more prominent and more popular, and people are liking them more, is they're starting to practice the way that chiropractors do. They're starting to see the power within.
Yeah.
And so I just want to say, there should be no ego involved in your practitioners, and your practitioners work for you, and you have the authority to hire them and fire them. They work for you, and they should always help you find the power within, and it shouldn't be the power from without of them dictated down to you.
Yeah.
I think that's very important.
I love that.
Should we we've got some great questions coming in the chat, and we will open it up for questions just a sec. I want to hit some of the common questions that might cover some of these, and then we'll go real direct with all these. So one, I'm sure you get a lot. This is pretty basic one. Someone is afraid to start fasting because they get woozy when their blood sugar goes low.
Okay. Great question. So if you have trouble metabolically switching, so that's what this person is saying. When I go without food, my body's trying to get over into the fat burner place, but it's not doing that, and I feel bad. So let's go back to this thought again. You have 2 metabolic systems, one that gets turned on when you eat and one that gets turned on when you don't eat. This is the sugar burner system. This is the fat burner system. You're literally a hybrid card. You have 2 fuel sources. So you've got to go 8 hours after the last thing you put in your mouth that spiked your blood sugar. At about the 8-hour mark, your body starts to do this. It starts to metabolically switch and go into the fat burning system. Research says that at about 12 hours, most people will be over in this system. And what their body is doing is it's burning fat to make something called a ketone. And so that ketone, this is how brilliant we are, that ketone goes up into the brain and it turns off the hunger hormone, and it stimulates a neurotransmitter named GABA. And GABA calms you. So smart, because the body's now got to go find food. So it needs to be calm. It improves our focus. And now we've got this energized product called a ketone. So, but this is a 4-hour process to get completely over. And the first couple of times you do, it can be painful. You can get headaches. You can feel woozy. These are all normal responses. And all it means is that this switch is a little rusty because you haven't used it. So the way you get over that hurdle is, let's say you figure out what that moment is of wooziness. Maybe that moment of wooziness is at 10 hours. So, okay, at 10 hours, you could do a couple of things. You could go for a walk and see if that helps. Get out into nature. Sometimes just changing your state works. You could try some minerals. Some people are really mineral depleted and they need some minerals to be able to just help them feel better. You could drink some tea or sometimes it's just a mind game and you just I've had people go take a nap before in that moment, just go sleep, you'll wake up, it'll be better. So there's a lot of little hacks there. But your goal would then be, can you go 10 hours and 30 minutes? Even if that 30-minute mark is suffering, just hang in there, because as things are difficult, the body is reorganizing itself. It makes itself stronger. Then maybe the next day you try 11 hours. And then the next day you try 11 and a half. And then the next day you try, 12 hours. So you're tiptoeing your way over here so that you can sort of remind the body what it's trying to do. But when I get people, this one drives me crazy. When people are like, fasting doesn't work for me, I feel horrible. I'm like, oh my God, that's more the reason you need to fast.
Yeah.
So it's just that the body may not have been used to it because you've never compressed your eating window, leaving these longer fasting times.
Love that. That's great. I also feel like whatever symptoms for me when I first started fasting, and by the way, once everything that Mindy's saying, once you get over that hump, you're over that hump and it's done. It's done.
There's to that point, by the way, there's no diet I know or exercise program that I know on the face of the planet that gets easier with time. Fasting is the only thing that gets easier. So you're so accurate on that.
Yeah. And let's build the foundation. So again, going back to what Mindy said, when we were hunters and gatherers, we did not have access to food for hours, definitely hours, sometimes days. So you think about, if we got woozy as our blood sugar went down, we wouldn't be here today. We would have died out forever ago, because so that is a result of us. I mean, I think 5 years ago, we were all told we needed to eat every few hours, right? Yeah. So we're not genetically designed to have this every couple hour meal. And so I just say all that to say, Heather, thank you for sending in your question. Just to give you kind of faith and that little oomph behind it, because our bodies are designed to function this way. And so it's a matter of getting through it. And then the last thing I'll say on that is, I have found, and I wonder if you found this in your community, any of the symptoms that came up for me as I was metabolically switching are things that I experienced throughout my days on smaller levels, but it was I was clearing all that crap out. So I would get little headaches, I'd get cranky, I was hangry. I mean, if I could switch off of eating carbs every 2 hours, I swear anyone could.
Yeah, right.
It wasn't a pretty couple of days.
Me too. I was the one that I would go to a seminar and I would have all my snacks in my backpack. And then I'd sit down and be eating all day long because I couldn't go more than 2 hours without food. So I agree. I'm always I was the least likely person to be the poster child for fasting.
Yeah. So it's just training. Okay. Next question. Great question. This person needs to make sure that they don't lose weight. So she's new to fasting, I believe is my understanding. And here's some specifics about it. So she's working on trying to get all her calories into that short eating window, but it's tricky when she's busy. So for example, if she finished eating around 4 p.m., then after 17 hours, she could eat. So first off, I'm kind of thinking a 17-hour fast might be a little bit long if you're not wanting to lose weight. So any advice on if you're not wanting to lose weight and some days are busy and you can't get all the food in a compressed eating window? And then also, are there certain things that you suggest? Maybe it's the 5-1-1. You can explain what that is, just to maybe have some shorter fasts worked in there, I would assume.
Right. Yeah, the 511 is a great example. So I always say, and this is outside of looking at this on a menstrual cycle, but 5 days a week that you do your comfortable fast. So if you don't want to lose weight, that I think 13, 15 hours is fine. The greatest study ever done on women, in fact, there's very few, but this one was really good. And it was a meta-analysis. So they looked at a lot of different studies. It was done on over 3,000 women. And what they found is that women coming out of traditional breast cancer treatment, that if all they did was a 13-hour fast every single day, they didn't even map it to hormones, that they had a 64% less reoccurrence of breast cancer. When I heard that, I was like, well, then we all should be doing 13-hour fasts. Like, why wouldn't we do that to prevent breast cancer? So I think that, it doesn't, the long fasts are healing tools. So if you don't want to lose weight, but you want to do a 3-day water fast, you might do it once a year. You're not doing it all the time. Or maybe you stay at 13 hours, 5 days a week. And then if we look at the 511, one of the ones is stretch your fast. So 1 day a week, you stretch your fast. So maybe you go to 17 or 24, and then 1 day a week, you feast. You don't fast. I have found that even people who are the thinnest, that seems to work. Now, the other thing that I do want to say is that the hardest part of fasting is that it can kill your hunger over time. The more you learn to fast, the less food you need. And I've actually spent a lot of time thinking about this, because you've all probably heard those studies that the less calories we take in, the longer we live. It's like one of the things that we know about the Okinawa women. Well, so I don't think we're supposed to have this massive amount of calories that most people are having. Now, mix that with some studies I've seen on the thyroid, that the thyroid needs about 1,200 calories a day consistently to stay healthy. So we may not need as much food as we think. And my next question for the person who doesn't want to lose weight is that nutrient dense food. This is why I'm a fan of meat, because it's got calories, it's got fat, it's got amino acids, it's got a lot there to help you build muscle. So I like the starches. I like beans. I like legumes. I like sweet potatoes are my favorite. I love squashes. Like these, when you start to look at some of the foods that are available, you see that you can fit a lot into a short window. But and I've even done this myself, because sometimes I'm not hungry, but I'll go to break my fast. I break it intentionally. And then maybe an hour later, I'll go and grab a bag of potato chips. Now, my potato chips, I make sure they have the right oils and stuff like that. But then I have to remind myself, I'm going to have dinner in a couple hours. Is this going to stop me from having a big dinner? And so those are the kind of things you look at. But in general, what we used to say is when you open up your eating window, eat. It's not a time to diet.
Yeah. When I would do like a 17-hour fast and would eat after seeing patients or whatever, it was almost like a double dinner. So I'd have like literally like sometimes 2 plates, like a huge salad with chicken, avocado, ton of fat, olive oil on it, and then like a whole plate of like spaghetti squash, meats. Is that what it's called? Spaghetti pasta, whatever, the zucchini pasta, meat sauce. Like you're literally trying to get all those calories in. And I know that's a lot for someone who's little, but I'm kind of little and I got it in.
Yeah, you are little.
Okay. I've got 2 more questions.
Little.
I've got 2 more questions from the back end, and then we'll hit the chat. And then I have 1 more, and then we'll talk menopause, because a lot of people want to know. Okay. So next question. This person, they feel that their energy went down since they began a reset. And then there's some things in the question that stick out at me a little bit. So she's on day 19 now. And while she hasn't been able to do a 24-hour fast, she did do some 20-hour ones. She hasn't used any supplement or MCT oil. She just drinks tea or water. She hasn't monitored glucose or ketones. And so she's wondering what can be a reason behind the lower energy levels, and what would you do if you were experiencing it?
Yeah, it's a great question. When you metabolically switch over here, you are now waking up the mitochondria of every cell. You're like, hey, I need you to make me some energy. And so you're trying to get that mitochondria to make more ATP. Sometimes when we switch over, we actually realize that mitochondria, your mitochondria in your body, are not as healthy as they should be. And so you've got to go and follow the principles of the mitochondria, and I'll give you some of them. The mitochondria have a bilipid membrane around the outside. So are you eating the good oils, not bad oils? Like that's a real clear, like only good oils, not bad oils. There's a list in the book. The second thing is, are you getting enough nutrients, amino acids specifically, which comes in the form of protein? So make sure if you're vegan, you're getting plenty of protein from your legumes and some of the protein-rich vegetables. If you're omnivore, then really you got to protein. It is the hero macronutrient right now. Absolutely think that a lot of people don't eat enough protein and they struggle to fast. So you change your fat, you eat more protein. Okay, third thing is that the outside of the mitochondria have little receptor sites, just like the outside of the cell, and toxins can get in there. So make sure you know your toxic load. This is where it sounds so silly, but like, one of the questions I used to get asked all the time is, could I just eat whatever I want and then just attack that onto a fasting window? And the answer is sure, you probably could, but over time, that's not going to get you ahead in the health game as much as you would like. But if we are lathering toxins on our skin, if we are living in a house that has mold, or has tons of air fresheners with phthalates in them, if we are constantly drinking out of plastic water bottles, if we're not looking at our toxic load, those mitochondria become very, very sluggish. So I just did a whole thing on this in my membership group today on how the number one thing to detox is stop the influx of toxins. So do you know what you're eating? Do you know what you're putting on your skin? Do you know what you're breathing in your house? These are things that become really important to understand. And that's way too detailed than I can really go into. I can tell you that the companion book for Fast Like a Girl is coming out in October. It's called Eat Like a Girl, and it's all about the eating window. It's available for pre-order now if anybody wants to pre-order it. And the reason I wrote it, it's a cookbook, but in the front matter it's like a whole book onto itself in front of the recipes, and it's all the principles of food. Because what I found were situations like this one that were asked, which is when people metabolically switched over, they either were struggling, they didn't feel great. That's a food issue. So I needed to come back and explain, hey, let's clean up the food system. Or they switched over and they felt so good, they were scared to go back to food. So that in that book, I have a lot of lists on chemicals and specifically something called an obesogen that should help.
Okay, great. So I'll make sure when we get off the call, I get all the links from you, and then that will be in the email tomorrow, guys. So we'll do a link to pre-order Eat Like a Girl. And then is it the Resetter community or it's something?
Yeah, it's a Reset Academy. Yeah, the Reset Academy is our membership group. And I just did, so that the video I did it literally this morning. It was the first call of my day. I did a whole hour-long talk on detoxing and what you need to know. So if you feel moved to join, it's there. I record.
Okay, so we'll put the link if you guys want to join that community to take your fasting to the next level. Okay, my last question is for women who no longer have their cycle. So how do they know how to fast, and how do they figure out what is day one?
Yeah. So if you're a menopausal woman, there's a couple of ways that you can look at this. You can do it weekly. So you could do a 5-1-1. I already talked about that. I've had some women do a 4-2-1, where 4 days a week they do their comfortable fast. 2 days a week they stretch their fast, and 1 day a week they don't fast. And then I've had people really metabolically challenged do what I call a 3-3-1, whereas 3 days a week you do a comfortable fast. 3 days a week you stretch your fast, and then 1 day a week you actually do a whole 36-hour fast. So it's like a 7 days and a half day. So that's for extreme cases. And these are all mapped out in the book, by the way. If you go to the appendix, I have so many of these protocols mapped out that we did for years. So you can do weekly, or you could just make up your own and do it weekly. The other thing is you can do the 30-day fasting reset that I put in the book. So it's already got it programmed for you. Or you can map it to the moon cycle. And this is the one that everybody's like, what? But actually, when you start to think about it, we are as women, we are so congruent with nature. So there is many beliefs. Now, I just want to say that they didn't research this. My favorite comment, when you put yourself out on socials, you get a lot of weird stuff coming at you. And my favorite comment was when I went on Mel Robbins' podcast, somebody said, I looked up her moon cycle theory, and I can't find any research on it. Therefore, I don't believe anything she's saying. Okay, researching our menstrual cycle, let alone how it maps to the moon. So, like, pretty sure in my lifetime, we will never see concrete research done on this thing that I'm about to teach you. So you have to tap in and go, does that work for me or does it not? So the moon cycle basically is the new moon would be day 1 of your period. And the full moon would be right smack in the middle of ovulation. It'd be like day 12. So what I tell menopausal women is just track the moon. When day 1 of the new moon starts, that would be like day 1 of your period. And that's everything I taught in the book about how you move around that fasting cycle or the 30-day reset. So, and a lot of people in my community, they're mapping everything. A lot of the menopausal women map everything to the moon. And I think the question then is, well, how does that work? And here's what I think the answer is I think if we went back to the cave hunter-gatherer days, because we had no artificial light, that the moon actually put us all in a certain circadian rhythm. And that circadian rhythm actually was what our hormones anchored onto. And our hormones mapped themselves to a circadian rhythm. So we probably all cycled back then at very similar times, and it was probably in accordance with the moon. It doesn't happen now because we're all exposed to synthetic light. So my favorite conversation I had last year was with a yoga instructor who was on Kauai, and she came to our house one day to do a yoga session, and somehow we got talking about the moon. And she said, and she was a surfer too. She goes, oh my God, everyone here, all the women here in the North Shore of Kauai, we can't figure out why we're all cycling together. We don't live in the same house. We don't know why, but in conversation, because it's a small community, we figured out we all cycle together. Okay, what's the commonality? I went on because she was also a yoga instructor. I'm like, are these all surfers? She's like, we came up with the fact that we think we're outdoors so much. And yes, we all surf. Okay, what's controlled by the tides? What controls the tides? The moon. Mm-hmm. So it's a really interesting thing. And most menopausal women, once they understand this, are like, oh, I'm going to map everything to the moon. That feels really good.
Yeah. It's again, just to build the foundation, and I think you guys all know this, but it's really important. Our genes have not changed since the day we came to this place. So what has changed dramatically is our environment. And we've gotten sicker and sicker over time. And so, from a chiropractic standpoint, we're always taught to look at what is the body biologically intended to have before man got in the way. And so like Mindy's saying, we weren't blasted with light at all times. You look at sea turtles, right? Sea turtle populations, you cannot put white light by them because it interferes with their circadian rhythm. We get messed up through light. Our cycles are 100% impacted. And so, as people are just getting more and more curious and making these natural health changes, and it's really about getting back to our natural state of health. It's not like you're not creating something that wasn't there. You're getting back to what's there from the beginning. This isn't let me find health. It's let me get rid of the stuff on top that's interfering with my natural state of health. Light plays a huge role. I see some red lights on over there.
I know. I love it.
Mindy's in Pacific time zone, so it's still daytime there. Sun's going down here. My red light's about to pop on, but these things make a huge difference in our hormones, in our sleep, in our metabolism, in all the things. And we both talk about these on our platforms. But I think light alone is such a has such a huge impact on our cycles.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a friend who was just on a crazy world tour around, going from Australia to UK to back to California. And after about 5 months of that, her cycle is all messed up. And I was like, well, your cycle has nothing to anchor onto. You kept changing the circadian rhythm. So it doesn't know what to do. So it's totally off. Or 1 month it shortened because she did this for 6 months. 1 month it shortened. 1 month it was longer. She had a breakthrough bleeding at like day 7 of her cycle. She's like, what the heck is that? So again, we have to anchor ourselves to our circadian rhythm. It's really important.
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to start at the top. Let's see. Okay. What if you take hormones, testosterone and progesterone?
To me, a fasting lifestyle is a perfect lifestyle to map with exogenous hormones. So, if you're menopausal and you're taking these hormones, again, you have free reign to do whatever you want. Now, let's talk about the principles of estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone that might be helpful. So I don't know if maybe whoever asked this can put in the chat, but I don't know if you're taking these hormones every day. Let's go through the personalities of the hormones, because for perimenopause and postmenopausal women, a lot of times we just have to keep going within and finding out what hormone needs my love today. So, progesterone needs your love when your hunger goes through the roof. So when those days you're like, I can't fast, I don't know why I can't fast. That's progesterone saying, give me more glucose. So you would want to, increase glucose, bring down fasting on those days. Estrogen does the opposite. Those are the days you're not hungry, and estrogen wants you to be more insulin sensitive. So those are the days, if you all ever notice, like some days you go to fast and you're like, God, I could just keep going. Like, it's just like so easy now. That happens so often. So in that scenario, that's just telling you that estrogen is showing up today. So if you take progesterone one day as an exogenous resource, and progesterone is supposed to calm you, progesterone is supposed to help you sleep, and that's not happening, then you need to make sure you have some higher carb, lower fast days to support the progesterone you're taking. So, and I take progesterone as well. And I'm postmenopausal. So I'll use myself as an example. I finally found a good rhythm with the amount of progesterone. It's giving me like 9 hours of sleep. I'm like, wow, this is incredible. But then remember, when progesterone goes up, estrogen goes down. And one of the signs of estrogen being low are hot flashes. And somewhere along the last week, I started to get some hot flashes. I haven't had hot flashes in a long time. And so my brain was like, oh, okay, this balance of estrogen and progesterone got off. So I need to fast a little more to bring estrogen up. I need to eat more keto to bring estrogen up. So I used that symptom to course correct. In the new book, by the way, I put all the symptoms and which food style you would want to do to help support those symptoms. So you kind of learn to read your cues. If you were spotting or anxiety, let's use anxiety. It's a great one. If anxiety all of a sudden goes up and you're taking your progesterone, you might need more love for progesterone, which would mean you got to fast less and you got to eat more carbs. So I don't know, Karen, if that helps, but it becomes a game of symptoms. And then the other thing I would just say on it is my experience using all these exogenous hormones and building a fasting lifestyle is the better I am at my fasting lifestyle, just, going in and out of different fasts and different foods, the less I need the exogenous hormones.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks, Mind. Okay. Thank you, Karen. Great questions. Okay. What days would be the best to take a B12 injection?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Do we know?
Well, okay. So in the new book, I'm really excited to bring to the world what I call the key 24. And the key 24 are all the nutrients that you need to make hormones. And B12 is definitely one. So I think the first thing to say is, what do you notice when B12 goes down? And energy is one. You'll notice less energy. Sometimes musculoskeletal pain can be up because B12 protects the nerve. It helps that myelin sheath around the nerve. So you can base it off your symptoms. Otherwise, most of the B vitamins are needed more within the front half of our cycle. So the key 24, when we look at these B vitamins, they definitely are more necessary in that front half of the cycle. So you might do a B12 injection then. The week before your period, you're meant to rest. So I don't want you amping up your energy the week before your period, because even if you're exhausted, it's your body going, hey, just rest me, please. And so it tries to give you signals. So that would be the other time I would say, don't do it. Don't do it the week before your cycle, because you're supposed to be in rest and recovery.
Great one. Okay. I think we have about 5 or 6 more. I'm on the autoimmune fasting. This comes from Monica. For 1 month, noticed great changes on her symptoms. Very exciting. She wanted to ask, when there are irregular periods, shorter or more than 30 days, so cycle, I guess, how do we manage the days and fasting windows? So I think she's saying, okay.
Yeah, I know what she's saying. So something interesting that I just want to point out on the circadian rhythm. I don't know why this popped in my head, but Sachin Panda is the world expert on circadian rhythm, and I brought him on my podcast. It recently came out. It's a phenomenal conversation, so you can go listen to it. But he said there were three things that our body attaches to when it comes, like, it makes a decision about what that circadian rhythm is. One is the timing of food, the other is movement, and the other is sleep. Those three things dictate our circadian rhythm. So that popped in my head to say, so I just want to say that. With autoimmunity, we also know that is the body attacking itself for a variety of reasons. We know your gut is off, which is why I have you going into some of these longer fasts. So as the timing of your food changes throughout that 30-day experience that I gave you in that protocol, you're going to see your circadian rhythm change a little bit. When your circadian rhythm changes a little bit, your hormonal rhythm is going to change a little bit, which is why you're seeing changes in your menstrual cycle length. So I just want to explain why that's happening. It's a good thing. So now, with that in mind, if, let's say, I have a 28-day cycle, like on the clock, now I start fasting, I start doing things, and now all of a sudden I have a 25-day cycle. If that's the case, you're just moving everything up. So, for example, instead of day 1 to day 10 being that power phase 1, you might do day 1 to day 7. And then starting day 8, you would go into the manifestation phase for 5 days. So it's really that front end that you're changing. You would go into manifestation for 5 days, and then you would come out, and power phase 2 may only be 2 or 3 days long. And then you go into nurture phase. So since this is about the book, I won't go into all the details of what those phases are, but you would just shorten that first part, and then everything would follow accordingly. The other thing I've recommended people get is you can get an ovulation kit and see where you're at. And then you might be able to, and you're only getting it just to see where you're, how to line up that manifestation phase. So we've had people do that as well.
I love that. I think the data is so key when you're trying to figure things out. I love the data. I don't like to get obsessed with the data, but to know it every now and then is great. Okay, agreed. Awesome. Thank you. Great question. Mm-hmm. Is Ketobiotic okay the week before a period? I know that we need carbs within that week.
Yeah, it is not. That is the 1 week where I really want people to bring their fast down, and I want them to carb load, because that's what progesterone requires. So, the keto got a really bad rap for a while for women. It was like nobody should do keto. And then I was like, no, you can splash keto in, you just don't do it the week before your period. So, and the reason for that is progesterone needs glucose to be higher. The whole purpose of Ketobiotic is to bring down glucose. So that is not the strategy the week before your period. The strategy is to bring glucose up. But that doesn't mean you go and like eat a tub of ice cream and a box of pizza. That means let's bring it up with squashes and potatoes and fruits. Like so many people go keto and then they're like, I'm never eating a fruit again. Eat a banana, have a pineapple, a mango, like during that time. So it is definitely not the time for keto.
Okay. Is fasting allowed for people after bariatric surgery?
Oh, it would be amazing. After any surgery or before any surgery is brilliant. And one of the greatest studies ever done or meta-analysis that was ever put out into the world was one done in the New England Journal of Medicine. And they looked at all the fasting articles and they came up with 5 things that they found intermittent fasting was good for. And one of those things was post-surgery. Now, they went in to talk about wound repair and things like that, which are really cool. But it's something like a bariatric surgery, yeah, because you want to give yourself a break. You're adapting to less ability to bring in food. So it's a perfect thing to do.
Okay, good question. Hold on, I just scrolled down. Okay, here's a good one. This is about measuring. I've been in menopause for a couple of years and I want to track my glucose levels. I want to try to hone in on if anything's spiking due to my energy levels being low. Was there something besides glucose that I need to focus on? I was going to get the kit that's on Dr. Sonner's website. I fast daily 7 p.m. to 10 a.m. and once a week for 24 hours. So I'm assuming Rochelle, you're either referencing the Keto Mojo, okay, or there's the continuous glucose monitor, the Keto Mojo. Okay.
Yeah, what's the difference between the two? So Keto Mojo is the most financially approachable for people. So, and I like that because I'm big on creating health tools that are free and don't cost a lot of money. So the Keto Mojo, I think is like $100 or something like that. So it's, and I like that it does ketones. Nothing else does ketones at this point. So before continuous glucose monitors, we would always have people in my clinic get a blood sugar reader. Keto Mojo was just coming out, so we would always recommend that one. And we would have people do a reading when they first got up of blood sugar and ketones. And then right before their first meal, they would do blood sugar and ketones again. And we did that for years and it was totally fine. So it is really helpful for you to see your metabolic switch because you want to know the ketones. So if finances are a consideration, get the Keto Mojo. Like it has the most utilitarian, like it just can serve more purposes. Now, what the Keto Mojo can't do, and why I want everybody to put a continuous glucose monitor on at least for any 2-week period, like each monitor goes for 2 weeks. So one of the things that I really want people to do is see your relationship to food. So I usually, when I first start working with a patient, I'll have them put that on and I'll just say, eat, just eat what you normally eat. And then we can see where they're getting snagged. So if you need to know more about dialing in your food, then the continuous glucose monitor is great. If you're like, I've already got my food dialed in, I want to know how my metabolic switch is, then you would need the Keto Mojo. And in some cases, I have people get both. So
okay,
good.
I
hope that helped. Yeah.
I know that was also insightful. The continuous glucose monitors provided a lot of insight into people in how their stress levels impact their glucose.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah.
So that's great. Okay.
I think everybody should get one for 1 2-week period and you test everything. And ask for it for Christmas, save $1 a day till you have enough money for it, however that looks. But it's that life-changing. We would end metabolic challenges if we put one of those on everybody and just let them see what food was doing to them.
Yeah, it's huge. The data is huge. And so when Mindy and I first met, we met in a group where it was chiropractic coaching and we all started learning about fasting together. And literally when we would go to these conferences and these small masterminds, we were being our blood was being tested throughout them. So we were put in a fasted state. And every couple of hours, we would go out in the hallway and we would test our ketones and our glucose. And it was incredible. We got to see, does coffee, it's like all the questions that you start to have when you start fasting. Does coffee throw me out? Can I have lemon in my water? Why am I tired? Well, maybe you're not making ketones and you're running off really low glucose and you just haven't tapped over yet. So it's so huge, whichever one you're going to use. I think the data is so important.
Agreed.
Okay, I'm doing the immune system reset. I'm on day 2, but it shows day 6 to 9 is 72-hour fast. Isn't that 4 days? Hopefully this makes sense.
6, 7, 8. Well, it depends on where you start. So, it depends. Like if you started at the end of a meal on day 1, then it's a little tricky like that. I'd have to pull up the book to see exactly how I said, but a 3-day fast is the best primer for the immune system, I know. So and here's the interesting thing. At that 3rd day, the white blood cells, according to Walter Longo, all the white blood cells reorganize themselves. They reboot, they re-energize, they're ready to go. You're also getting a real boot of stem cells, and stem cells can go anywhere in the body and it can start to heal any body part. So what a lot of people like to do is do 3 days, get to that 3-day mark and then stay there a while. So sometimes, because now on that 3rd day, you've got these stem cells and you've got, this immune system that's really priming itself. So they'll go 4 days or 5 days. But the way I meant it to be in the book is a 3-day water fast. So if you want to go longer, you can.
Okay, these are such great questions, guys. I love it. We have one more question and then I'm announce the next book. Okay, last question. If my cycle is 35 to 45 days, what is the best way to follow the 30-day reset fasting? Follow-up question. If I'm planning on getting pregnant soon, when should I stop fasting?
Ooh, good question. Okay, opposite problem. We just go, instead of the 10 days, in the first 10 days of your cycle, she said that she's 35. I would probably go 15 days. Your power phase 1 would be 15 days. And then day 16, you would go into manifestation. So if you have read the chapter on the fasting cycle, that should hopefully make sense. So as opposed to what I said earlier, which is somebody, their length and their cycle is changing and it's getting shorter, we shorten that first phase. So it's always the first phase that either gets shortened or lengthened depending upon where you are in your cycle. So that would be the first one. Getting pregnant. Okay, so this is really interesting. When we first started teaching the fasting cycle to our patients and then to the world, I was just blown away at how many people were getting pregnant, like left and right. It's kind of like, there's all these Ozempic babies. And the reason that people are getting pregnant on Ozempic is because they're fixing their metabolic system temporarily on this drug. So you're doing the same thing with a fasting lifestyle. So the first thing is, if you're trying to get pregnant, it's a beautiful thing to do because it really helps with ovulation. It helps with conceiving a baby. The thing you want to make sure you don't do is when you come out of your ovulation window, which is about day 16, you're not fasting. It's not your tool. You need to bring progesterone up. You need to eat a little more carbs. So you're going to extend that nurture phase. And you're going to bypass the second power phase and you're going to just extend the nurture phase. You want to eat more nourishing carbs. You don't want to fast. And then if you bleed, okay, now you can go back into fasting. You can go back into ketobiotic. But it's that, technically, if you have a fertilized egg at ovulation, come out of ovulation, we need to make the environment pro-progesterone so that egg can implant on the uterine wall.
Good one. Okay. Can she keep fasting for 13 hours during pregnancy?
Okay. So this is interesting. During pregnancy, I don't recommend fasting. It is not your tool. I really recommend food and good food, specifically food that falls into what I call the 3 Ps: probiotic, prebiotic, and polyphenol foods. Because they feed your microbiome. I would add a 4th P, which is your protein load needs to go up. And most people know that. But what most people don't know is that you literally are passing down your microbiome to your child. So your child gets the microbiome as it comes out through the pelvic canal, all the juices, like that's all microbiome and that's all bacteria in there, that much of it has been created by foods you eat or what, the good, putting good things on your skin. And then your baby comes out. This is why C-section babies tend to have more allergies and more immune system problems. So your baby comes out of the womb and all those vaginal juices go in its nose and goes down into its stomach and populates its stomach and creates a microbiome built off of your microbiome. So get your microbiome ready when you're pregnant. Get off any of the hand sanitizers or get off the mouthwashes or the toothpaste that kill bacteria. You want to bring in this good bacteria so that you pass that down to your baby. Second place that you pass your bacteria down is in your breast milk. So they've actually done studies where they've taken identical twins and a mom has only fed each twin on the same breast. And when she goes to pump her milk, they can see color differences. They can test nutrient differences because this is how brilliant we are. Our bodies are so well designed that we adjust the microbes and the nutrients in our breast milk so that we give our baby exactly what it needs. And the saliva in our baby's mouth, when it's latched onto our nipple, actually tells our body what is needed for that baby. Like that, like we're so cool. We're so cool. Incredible. We're so cool. Like we are. So your microbiome is the number one thing that you need when you are going into a pregnancy. So and when you come out postpartum, you can fast then. With nursing, I always say 13 to 15 hours fasts are fine. You just don't want to hit autophagy.
Love it. Okay, guys, incredible questions. And I know so many people will listen to the recording and get the benefit of their questions. We'll have all the links for you guys listening now to Mindy's Academy and other resources. Okay, so I'm going to announce our next book. I chose one book for the rest of the summer. And then this way, what you guys can do, this book is plenty for the whole summer. It's actually designed on a 12-week program and activity that we can do together. And then also this gives you guys the opportunity to work in more of fasting book or, revisit some old books that we've read. So I want to start by reminding everyone or just sharing my whole mission for this community is to get you back to yourself. And so each book that I choose is very intentional in helping us get to that place. So for instance, I wanted to choose, I chose Fast Like a Girl because from a chemical standpoint, I feel like fasting really, again, like I said before, we are innately healthy. This isn't about creating something we're not. It's getting rid of everything on top of us, getting rid of the toxins, the inflammation, the food every 2 hours. And magically what that does is it gets you back to incredible you. And so if you've noticed a pattern, if you've been in Book Nook for a while, I tend to do kind of a spiritual and then kind of a chemical, sciencey kind of thing. And so now the next book is really about kind of clearing out some of the emotional static and interference that gets in the way of our being our true self, highest self, best self, favorite self, whatever you want to call it. And this is about, getting to know ourselves better by spending time with ourselves. And I think for a lot of women, that can be really scary. And I think either consciously or subconsciously, we distract ourselves out of that alone time with our phone for the most part. And that's a big intention with Book Nook. If I can just get you all and me included to, instead of grabbing the phone, grab a book, what an impact that can make. Mind, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you. No, thank you. And I have to give a shout out to my sweet friend here. She is literally one of the most special humans on the planet to me. And wow, does she give up some incredible life and health advice. So you all are in a beautiful place. We have a morning ritual. She's East Coast, I'm West Coast. So I usually wake up to a message from her and then send her a message back. So we talk every day, and just such a brilliant and beautiful mind. So I'm really excited you all are diving deep with her. It's a right place to be.
Thank you, Mindy. Thank you. Thanks so much for tuning in to the discussion of our most recent book in Book Nook. If you're loving these deep conversations and dives into transformative books, be sure to join Best Friends Book Nook, my free online community for women, where we explore life-changing reads together every month. I'll link that below. If you want to take it a step further, Beehive members, my private membership, get exclusive perks like staying on as a live audience for our podcast recordings and even getting to ask the authors their burning questions. All the details for Book Nook or become a Beehive member are linked in the description below. Let's keep the conversation going, and I'll see you soon in the next episode.